Welcome everyone to Flyover Footy on the Big 550 KTRS. It's a special day in that we're recording on Matt Baker's birthday. Happy birthday, Matt, and welcome to the show. How's it going, buddy?
Thanks, buddy. It's going great. I'm excited to talk City on my birthday. We've got a match ahead of us. We've got a win behind us. Had a nice chat with Thomas Totland this week. That's on our midweek pod. So it's a good time.
Yeah. Any big plans today? Since we're talking about your birthday, what's the big celebration going to be?
Not much, honestly. Just spending some time with the girls, having a nice little Mexican dinner, which is my favorite type of food, and
Perfect.
taking it easy with them.
Sounds wonderful. I hope you enjoy it. We got a game to talk about here. It's a Sunday night game. So I'm excited for that. Oh, yeah. See, I'm staring at the notes and you're about to fix it for me because I was going to mess it up. But I was right, wasn't I, Matt? It's a Sunday night game against Portugal. Portland. I do that every time.
We've got international break going here.
It's fresh in my mind because Portugal did beat Germany for the first time in forever yesterday.
But yeah, Sunday night soccer, 6 p.m. and it's on a mild slate of MLS games. That's one of the things we're going to mention is there's only 5 total MLS matches. 3 of them are on Sunday, and we get the featured one this weekend against Portland.
Yep. Should be hopefully fun. I mean, I think we're definitely looking forward to the game because, Critchley's in the lead. It's an away game. We have a lot to kind of think about and a lot to learn from this game. And we are going to dig into that pretty strongly, as you guys know, if you've heard this show before. So we will do that in just a minute. But I think, Matt, we've got some exciting news or interesting news to cover before we dig into the team.
Yeah, it's that kind of time of year where there's a lot of things happening. There's call-ups that we talked about last week with some youth national team on City and the City organization. We have to give flowers first and foremost to Edu Leuven. Talked about him on Fallout last week. He's been on the tip of everybody's tongue this week in what the impact he had on last week's game was, not only earning player of the match day for City as far as the fan vote, but he was named to the MLS team of the match day as well with his 1 goal, 1 assist performance. He got the assist on the Klaus goal, thankfully, deservedly, and obviously the match-winning PK. So Leuven makes for a return for a City player to the team of the match day as they broke this winless streak. And then big kudos to Tyson Pierce. We know that Pierce and Mackay Joyner are both with U.S. youth national team, Pierce with the U18s and Joyner with the U19s. And Phil, you noticed this one that Tyson Pierce started and went 65 for the youth national team U18s in a 2-0 victory over Argentina on Wednesday. So big kudos. And I think Pierce played right back in that, if I saw the lineup correctly.
The first game, he came in for the left back, but I am not sure whether he's considered a two-way player, which he's done before, right, with City too, or whether the current right back at that moment is a two-way player and he went over to left back. So I'm not sure. The thread that was amazing, really cool. I think it's USMNT Report put out this thread. Thank goodness for that, man. Look him up on x.com. But so I'm not sure, he didn't specify, but probably I would guess that he went in at left back. But in the second game, he started and played 65 minutes at right back with the left back playing left back that he replaced in the previous game.
Perfect. So, I mean, that's great for Tyson Pierce getting some minutes, visibility on the U18s, and we hope to see it progress. But Mackay Joyner, the one note on that is a reminder, he's with the U19s, and that's going to impact some conversations we have later on with our depth.
Game today.
On Thursday, June 5th, accurate. Yeah. So if you're listening to this on the pod on Friday or Saturday, check back on our social medias, check back on USMNT reports to see what Mackay Joyner might have been doing. Hopefully he gets a good run out. I think that'd be great to see him with some USMNT US youth national team visibility rather.
Yeah, and looking forward to there is a really good thread on the national team, and this guy broke down, I forgot his name right now, but you guys are going to see it from me. He broke down all the players in this age group that are playing in MLS and how many minutes they've played. Tyson Pierce, some of those guys have played a lot of minutes. Most have not. So that's like good and bad, right? But that's someone that we look forward to getting MLS minutes, and we get a little bit of a comp there on perhaps where he might be able to fit in with MLS, whether this year or next year.
Love it. Love it. The last bit of news before we get into our preview, I just have it was kind of an interesting observation, rather, that myself and a few other media members made on Wednesday's training, because this week training was open to media on Wednesday, and they will be on Friday with the press conference ahead of the match on Friday. It was noteworthy to me that we saw President and GM Diego Gigliani, as well as sporting director Lutz Pfannenstiel, together walking the sidelines of the training fields and actually taking in training, watching training, having conversations side by side, talking together, watching. Noteworthy to me because they don't usually do this. It's not it might not be the very first time, but it's the first time that I can recall that that's happened where both of them have been together. Typically sometimes you'll see Diego walking if he's got some event or fans or really something that's arranged for him to go down there for. Same thing with Lutz. Obviously he has an office in the training facility, so he'll be there from time to time, but it's the first time I can really remember them both being together, both actually watching training. And there was one fun moment where Edu Leuven during training, as it was, where the team was just going hard, he had to step aside and he was getting worked on a little bit. It was nothing to worry about. Don't read anything into it. It's just typical things that happen. But Lutz sees this, and it reminds me of what I told you, Phil, before we started recording. It reminds me of this dad at a club soccer level where he sees his kid go down, injured, taken off, and he's running down there to the sideline, wanting to know what's going on, what's wrong with my boy. And that seemed like what Lutz was doing to Edu Leuven, where he was concerned. He's like, oh, what's going on now? Going in and checking on him. It was all fine. Everything was no worries at all. That was just kind of noteworthy and a fun thing to see. And it's different. It was part of this whole different, I guess, allure that we have going on with not just training, but the games and the leadership, the culture shift almost of sorts that David Critchley has brought, and that Lutz and Diego really seem to be helping to kind of craft and mold in a different way compared to where we started the first 15 games of the season. So a fun little bit of knowledge going into this game that we saw at training on Wednesday.
And even the more human side of that, I hope that it's all just like they're so close and he doesn't want to see something bad happen. But my goodness, the injuries have been so bad and this season has been so derailed that it's just like one more thing. Like I cannot take one more problem in this sister to pile on this season to pile onto that. So yeah. Interesting thing to notice there, Matt. That was really interesting and fun. Shall we start digging into Portland, or did you have more news?
No, let's dig into Portland. There's a lot to know. And before we actually dig all the way into Portland, looking back at the way, because we liked to see what we did last week against San Jose, it's the first time these two teams have met in 2025, but they've played a total of 5 matches. This is one of the teams that St. Louis has played the most because of Leagues Cup. And St. Louis is actually 2-1-2 with 2 wins, 1 loss, and 2 draws, including a 3-1 win in Leagues Cup last year against the Portland Timbers. So cumulatively, in their 5 matches, St. Louis has scored 10 goals and allowed 8, including that massive 4-4 draw last August. I think we all remember that goal fest that occurred where it was just raining down goals against Portland. But this match coming in is going to be, I wouldn't categorize it as a David versus Goliath, but this is going to be a tall task. Portland comes into this match 5th place in the West with a 7-4-5 record on 26 points, 25 goals scored, 22 goals against, plus 3 goal differential. But at home, they are 4-1-3. So this is a very strong Portland team at home. And in their last 3, this is also a rested Portland team because the last time they played was on Wednesday, May 28th. That's 11 days between matches. They kind of had a bye week last week, so they were just watching and kind of idle. But in that May 28th match, they won against Colorado at home 2-1. Before that, they had a 1-0 loss away to Orlando and a 1-1 draw against Seattle. In the last few games and in this season so far for Portland, they have not lost a home match this season since their opener in February against Vancouver 4-1. And we know the start that Vancouver's had to this season. We know that they're in the pole position in the Western Conference. So that's a team that I think everybody would expect to lose against, or at least have a tough opponent. And that was the last time that Portland lost at home. First match against Vancouver. 4 of their 6 wins so far, they've scored 4 of their wins so far, they've scored at least 3 goals. So this is a team that is really having a lot of success in goal scoring in when they win matches. But in their 4 losses, they've failed to score more than 1 goal per match. So if they win, they're tending to score buckets of goals. If they lose, it's because they're kept off the sheet almost entirely. 13 of their 25 goals scored have come at home. So they've been a pretty balanced team in that regard. But the big story for Portland is their player availability. They've had a key injury or 2 they've carried in the past few games, but we're also, as we record this, we're both wearing our USMNT jerseys. This is kind of that international window, the international quote unquote break that's going on with MLS. Having only 5 matches on the docket, a lot of camps have started, a lot of friendlies are going on, a lot of matches, tournament prep. And so as such, you're looking at some player availability issues for Portland on that front, on top of their injuries. So let's look at some injuries they had from last week. Zach McGraw hasn't been a regular starter since early March, but he was out last week out a week and a half ago with a back injury. He may return, but he's been playing in US Open Cup, Next Pro matches. And if he does return, he's likely to start on the bench. James Pantemis, I believe is pronounced, had a leg injury, missed a handful of games. He's their goalkeeper, but he trained prior to their Orlando game and trained prior to the Colorado game before. So he looks like he's going to appear to be on track to play this game, which is a big deal, as we're going to mention in a minute, because Maxime Crépeau, their other goalkeeper, is out. So Pantemis is likely to start between the pipes. I think he should return after being injured for a few games. The big noteworthy injury for Portland to know about is Jonathan Rodriguez, a lower body injury. And it sounded this week, by all accounts, from Phil Neville, their head coach, that he will be out. Phil Neville said on June 3rd, quote, he'll be out for the next couple of weeks, and he's still dealing with the same knee injury since preseason. Big loss, Jonathan Rodriguez, and it's a player that they haven't really been able to count on this season, even though he's had a lot of success for them last year when he came on board. He had scored 16 goals with 5 assists in 33 matches last season. That was his first since coming over from Club America. So he was a big acquisition, and they haven't really had his availability this week. And then on the international front for Portland, Ari Lassiter, Costa Rican international, he provides depth in their attack. He's played in 13 games in all comps with 1 assist. He is going to be out. Maxime Crépeau, a Canadian men's national team goalkeeper, he's played 9 matches so far. He will be out as well because he was called into their pre-Gold Cup camp. But Kamal Miller, who will be on the Gold Cup roster for Canada from Portland, will be in this game. He's expected to feature against St. Louis because he was not called in to the pre-Cup camp. He's expected to be available versus City. That's Kamal Miller, one of their defenders. Finn Sermon is the other player, New Zealand international. He's one of their primary center backs who's played in 15 MLS matches and an Open Cup match. He will miss as well, expected to be with New Zealand during this match. So you have a well-rested team, 11 days between matches. You have the depth that may be tested because of injuries and internationals out. But you do have a balanced attack. And we're going to talk about some of the players here in a little bit. They have 3 players with 5 goals scored. They want to continue that at home. Phil, my question is, and this may be just what do you think a team usually handles with this, but should we expect a little rusty Portland team, or is this going to bode well for fresh legs going into this match on Sunday?
Well, my first thought was, when St. Louis gets too long of a break, that's when things just completely break down, right? But I mean, we're talking about what is the League's Cup was a bit of a different situation. So, if it was St. Louis, I'd say, boy, this is something to watch. But I think in most cases, I think Portland will come in fresh and strong. I actually think them missing so many more players would be more of a problem, don't you?
I do, and especially Jonathan Rodriguez. And they've been so up and down in their attack so far this season. It'll be interesting to see how they continue managing, because he returned and now he's out again. It's almost like he re-aggravated, and this should sound very familiar to St. Louis fans, but it does sound like he re-aggravated that injury. So I guess it's some solace to know that we're not the only team that deals with this re-aggravation of sorts. And obviously we don't wish any player injuries, but they are dealing with a little bit of what we've been dealing with all season long. So going with St. Louis now, looking at where St. Louis is coming into this match, we're still in 14th. You're listening to Flyover Footy on the Big 550 KTRS, and we're about to dive into St. Louis as part of this preview. Let's set the stage for where St. Louis is. 14th in the West after all was said and done last week. 3-8-5 record, 14 points, 13 goals scored, 21 goals against. Still got a -8 goal differential, so we still have a long way to go to dig ourselves out of that hole that Olaf Melberg helped to dig for us. But we ended our 11-game winless streak in MLS play with the debut of David Critchley as our caretaker manager last week against San Jose. The last few matches, that San Jose win at home, the loss against Colorado away, and then the back-to-back losses against Minnesota. We know about that. Rather than go on to the trends that St. Louis has been showing, the only trend that matters to me is last week. The new coach bounce happened. We saw a return to form for what we were expecting by and large for a St. Louis City style. And I believe you can refer to that, in my opinion, as a back-to-basics match. This got us where we needed to be as we now look to progress with Critchley at the helm. And looking at the injuries and availability, though, is a mixed bag, I think, at best. So let's run through all of the things that we know. Most of this information coming after Wednesday's training and what we've heard and seen with City 2 playing Wednesday night as well. So Edu Leuven, the only question for Edu Leuven to me is, will he travel with his situation? Edu Leuven has been training. There's no injury concerns. There's no issues with his fitness. So the only question is, will he be able to make that trip to the West Coast, knowing what his situation is at home? Jean De Silva missed training on Wednesday. And if you listen to our midweek pod, this is no surprise to you. He was in New York during the break, the quote unquote break that City had, the couple of days off that the team was given after their afternoon match on Saturday and before they started training this week. So he went to New York. David Critchley said, quote, he'll know of his fine for not being with us today, end quote. And that said that he would have an individual training session on Wednesday night and then be back with the team on Thursday. Doesn't sound like it's anything more than that, but it's kind of a weird, noteworthy thing where Silva, I guess, was visiting friends or he was in New York. I don't know the circumstances around not being in St. Louis, missing a flight, what the deal was with that, but he was in New York. He wasn't in training on Wednesday. He will be back with the team in training on Thursday, and we expect him to go into the weekend full steam ahead. Giannis Horn, good news on Giannis Horn. I touched on the midweek pod about his loan status. So if you haven't listened to that, basically we're not going to pick up the option for Giannis Horn. He has a month left on his loan with us, and then he's expected to go back to Germany, possibly sign with an Austrian team, Rapid Wien. Right now, Giannis Horn has returned to full training, and he's with the team, did a little extra jogging to get some fitness on Wednesday. But we're going to see if Giannis Horn is ramped up enough to be able to start on Sunday. That's the biggest question, and we're going to circle back to that in full in a little bit. But on the bad side, we've got Cedric Toy shirt Chris Durkin, where on Wednesday after training, David Critchley said he was monitoring them daily. Nothing formal now as far as availability goes. We should find more out about that on Friday's press conference. And then the availability report that comes out on Saturday from MLS. Critchley said both of them missed training on Wednesday, which they did. Also missed training was Rasmus Alm and Joachim Nilsson. Neither had real updates. So I'm comfortable in saying right now, Rasmus Alm and Joachim Nilsson will be out again for Sunday's match. Also out for Sunday's match is Conrad Wallem. He's suspended due to his red card to end the San Jose match, which is just a really unfortunate, rather boneheaded move, letting his emotions get the better of him in that sense. Good news, though. Got to end this one on good news, Phil. Kyle Hebert will be available. He had a big question mark because he wasn't on the availability report. He wasn't on the roster at all, missed his first match of 2025. And we found out that it was mostly related to fatherhood. Kyle Hebert and his wife welcomed their first child. He missed the match last weekend as a result of that. But Critchley also said he had some tightness in his leg. We know he missed some parts of training last week. So kind of a combination. But at the same time, Hebert is a full go now, was in training. He'll be good to go for Sunday. And then Jay Reed. Jay Reed's the last little bit as he played 90 with City 2 after David Critchley asked him last Sunday if he wanted to play 90, if he wanted to play for City 2. And then Critchley was very cognizant that John Hackworth, the interim coach for City 2, knows what his load is. He knows how to evaluate him, what they need. And they allowed him to go 90 minutes against North Texas. So that was noteworthy. But also Critchley really kind of juxtaposed that with the fact that they had a hard training on Wednesday. So if you're looking to compare Reed's workload on Wednesday night with City 2 versus what his teammates did on Wednesday, it seemed like he's trying to draw a parallel there. And I think that Reed will be available to go if they need him on Sunday. We're going to talk about some of the depth and the defense that we're going to have going into the Sunday, but I don't think Reed playing 90 for City 2 on Wednesday night really precludes him from anything. And if anything, to me, it's a good sign for Giannis Horn that he should be good to go at left back. Everybody else is good to go. Henry Kessler, Thomas Totland, Alfredo Morales, everybody else that I didn't mention, good to go.
Love that. And, I'm looking at these injuries, looking at who's available. I would say it's mostly good, right? And we're going to have a really fun conversation about the lineup, I think, on this one, especially with Wallem being out and Hebert being available. There's new information to be gathered here as far as what Critchley does in this game. But Matt, I'm looking at your biggest City storylines, and I want to jump right into that if that's okay with you.
Please do.
Looking at the new coach bump, you're asking, like, can they carry that for 2 weeks on the road? I think that's for me, the biggest storyline coming into this when you combine it with what is St. Louis going to look like under Critchley away, you know?
Yep. And that's a really good question. Can they continue to build upon themselves? Critchley mentioned a lot of good things we're going to talk about here in a bit. Some of the stats, some of the underlying metrics that they look at that were positive. But away games in MLS are just a different beast. We know that Portland actually can win games having both high and low percent possession. I was trying to draw some correlations with this Portland team between do they lose matches if they have low percent possession? Is this going to be a game where if City manages 55% possession like Critchley ideally wants, will we have an inherent advantage? And honestly, this Portland team can attack no matter what. They're a pretty good counterattacking team. Talk about some of their strengths in a minute. But I think the biggest thing is, can St. Louis stay within themselves and take what they need to from that San Jose match and really increase the quality, probably on the ball more than anything, and look to improve and get the ball to their attackers more? Because, we had a lot of positives. The vibes were really high after that San Jose game. But if you start to dig into the numbers, there are some concerning things that were still there. Like Klaus only touched the ball, I think, 22 times. We didn't get the ball into our attackers' possession very much. There wasn't much build in the final third. It was very direct from the middle third. And we still need to continue to do better at getting numbers higher up the field. And a lot of that's all going to initiate from how well we press, how well we counter press if we lose possession, and how much we can force Portland to lose the ball in some of the less dangerous areas for them.
I'm glad you mentioned some of those stats. And obviously you guys get more in the ether stuff from me, a little bit more eye test kind of stuff. But I did look at the stats, and looking at all of the stats, I think you can generally say that City outplayed San Jose by just a little bit, right? And you could even say that little bit could even be attributed to that 12th man that Critchley went on about in the presser, which I enjoyed. But some of the questions I have after that game, positive, right? Really happy. But I think we can all agree that improvement is necessary to kind of keep this going, and especially being away, traveling across the country, that affects MLS teams a lot more than we realize, I think. When, for example, when Vancouver came to St. Louis, they looked just awful compared to the rest of the season. So I think that had something to do with that, perhaps just a little bit. But we also played San Jose. Their best attackers came in later in the game. So after 2/3 of the game was over, the second they came in, they scored a goal. So that's a little bit scary. I think the PK was it questionable? I don't know. I think all credit to St. Louis to keep the pressure on. It was a very Betcher situation. So it went our way. But if it didn't go our way, would we have gotten that win? Is that the sort of thing that gave us another bump that we won't have in the future games? So all that said, I think we just need to see a lot of improvement. They can't rest on their laurels, and I'm excited to see what that looks like away. Will they defend more? Will they rely on their press more? These are things that I would actually consider if I was the coach of City. But again, for the millionth time, I'm so excited to see what Critchley does in this one.
That's right. We do have other questions. I think we're going to get to a lot of the other topics with St. Louis here in a bit. So do you want to dive into our tail of the tape?
Please do. Thank you.
Absolutely. So let's look at some of the Portland strengths and qualities that they're going to carry into this game. Portland has shown an ability to play with 3 center backs and wing backs, but David Critchley fully expects this team to play with 4 in the back. He expects there to be some space between the lines that City's going to look to exploit. In this 2025 season as a whole, under head coach Phil Neville, Portland has been pretty dynamic. They've had an aggressive style of play. They've had a high tempo transition and direct attacking approach. It's been pretty effective at capitalizing on opponents' turnovers. So St. Louis will have to be guarded to be quality on the ball, especially in some of those dangerous areas that Portland will look to take advantage on. They may not high press, but Portland will look to attack the midfield, the wide areas especially, and look to create turnovers in the middle third of the field at the very least. The Timbers want to exploit those spaces quickly and efficiently, not unlike St. Louis. In the attack, Portland has emphasized those quick transitions, the direct play. I mentioned that they had really success on both sides as far as the high possession, the low possession. They've been effective at creating scoring opportunities in rapid counterattacks, utilizing pace, positioning of their forwards. They have a pretty balanced approach, I would say. They've been dynamic, but very balanced. It looks like, and they've had a lot of new player additions. Kevin Kelsey's bolstered their attack. They've had a physical presence up top, aerial threat in the final third. So this team is a little bit different based on some of the signings we'll talk about in a second, compared to some of the previous Portland teams that we've played in the past few years. And then defensively, this team has been a little porous. They've had challenges. They've got a small goal differential despite being in 5th place. And I think that's reflective of the propensity they have to allow goals, which does bode well for St. Louis. In the consistency, the organization in the back, they're going to be missing a couple players. They're going to be potentially missing, or they will be missing Maxime Crepeau. So their goalkeeper situation is going to be a little fluid. So they've had some improvements. They've had a new signing or two, but issues like conceding from set pieces, lapses in concentration from those dead ball moments, those have persisted. So if St. Louis is going to be taking advantage of any of these mistakes, set pieces really do seem like an area that St. Louis can focus on and really have to hone in, because St. Louis has also been a little lackadaisical when it comes to taking advantage of fouls drawn, corners earned, set pieces that they have taken, and they haven't really manifested goals. But at the other side, they have allowed goals off set pieces. So I think both teams, this game could be won in a dead ball situation if you look at if they end up balanced in the run of play. If Portland can address some of these defensive vulnerabilities in this game, then St. Louis could be a problem for St. Louis. Now, tactics-wise, Phil Neville has shown a willingness to adjust those tactics. I mentioned that they've played with a wing-back system. They've played with a back four. Depending on the opponent and match situation, if Critchley's wrong on this one, I wonder how much it's going to affect some of the tactics that they have. If Portland goes with a much wider attack, opening up their midfield in a wing-back look, St. Louis obviously will be planning for this kind of a thing, but it sounds from Critchley's comment like it will be more plan A is Portland going with 4 in the back, plan B is going with wing backs, and seeing how they can adjust if they do end up doing that. But at the same time, Portland's, looking at the same kind of thing. They're looking for, where is St. Louis the most vulnerable? Maybe they're going to look to the San Jose match in particular because it was the only data point they have from David Critchley. So if you're a fan, you're watching and you're wondering what's Portland going to run out with, Portland's probably remembering the San Jose game. So look to that game. That's why we touched on it a few times earlier, because that's the data Portland has. When they figure out what they're going to want to do, what is David Critchley going to offer, they're going to be looking at Portland, but they're also going to be looking to City 2 possibly earlier this season in how Critchley approached his matches. On Phil Neville's side, they could adjust their team's pressing intensity, the defensive line height, disrupting the opposition's rhythm. They're looking to regain the ball in advantageous areas. So they're looking to do some similar things that St. Louis is looking to do in their counter pressing. But overall, when you look at this Portland team in 2025, their attacking philosophy does look to overwhelm opponents. Speed and directness. They're looking to not play the ball around, which speaks to the propensity of high possession and low possession. They're able to adapt to their opposition. So in general, this St. Louis team is a low possession team, but with Critchley, they did show a little propensity to try to be on the ball a little bit more. So it's going to be interesting to see how well Portland adjusts to this. And if they want to try and give St. Louis possession, knowing that Critchley wants to have the ball a little bit more to try and be more effective in some of those middle third areas with it. The one thing I think we can look for with this Portland Timbers team is it's going to be entertaining. Most of their matches have been high scoring. They've had a few 1-0, 0-0s. But by and large, they've had some of the most amount of games with 3 or 4 goals scored. And we talked earlier about last year, St. Louis had a 4-4 match against Portland under Phil Neville. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that we could be looking at a high scoring match. We could at the very least be looking at a lot of shots, a lot of both teams having transition moments, both teams looking to counterattack and to have a really direct to goal approach. It could be a game where you're looking to feel each other out at first, and you might see lack of meaningful possession to start the game. But I think once both teams get going, this is going to be a fast-paced match. And I do think it bodes well for that Sunday night soccer appeal, because Portland loves to entertain. They love to have high-scoring matches. St. Louis wants to get back into that. We want to get into that fluidity of play that leads to a high-scoring match. This could be the game that really breaks it all out for St. Louis and continues that high-scoring trend for Portland.
Indeed. Yeah. I thought I knew the things about like how direct they are, how much they like the transition game. And I didn't realize they were struggling with defense this year. So that's interesting. I was thinking this would be a bit like a Melberg looking, team. And even at times when I thought, well, what does a good Melberg team look like? Mm-hmm. I think Crystal Palace, #1, right? And then I literally thought about Portland. I thought they kind of play that style. But I think what I was a little worried about, I like that they might feel each other out and see where this game goes. I think that benefits St. Louis. I think if Portland comes in with a strong, I was worried they would come in with just like, I dare you to try to score on this kind of situation. And I'm scared of that this soon in Critchley's tenure. So it sounds like it could be a good thing. It sounds like at least City has an opportunity to take advantage of something by really putting in a good shift.
And St. Louis knows the quality that Portland has. There's no surprise on who's going to be in quality in the attack. You have Anthony, a Brazilian 23-year-old, wears the number 11, 5 goals, 5 assists in 16 matches. Felipe Mora, a Chilean 31-year-old, number 9, 5 goals, 2 assists in 16. Kevin Kelsey, I mentioned him earlier, one of their new signings, Venezuelan 20-year-old, number 19, with 5 goals in 15 matches, but only 6 starts. So very effective with Kevin Kelsey. And then David Costa, Portuguese 24-year-old, number 10. DaCosta was acquired as the Evander replacement. So if you're thinking about having lost Evander, well, they've got David DaCosta, 24-year-old with 2 goals, 6 assists in 16 matches. Kevin Kelsey, the reason that he's so dangerous and the reason that whether he starts or not, he was bought for $6 million and he's 6'4". He's a huge body in that attacking end. So you're looking at Henry Kessler, Timo Baumgartel as you need to have this height advantage back there on your back line because you're going to be facing some attackers that have that aerial capability. David DaCosta himself was bought from RC Lens this offseason for $6 million. So you're looking at both those players, DaCosta and Kelsey, as $12 million total acquisitions. Other notables, they brought in João Ortiz, an Ecuadorian defensive mid, who's expected to be the replacement and successor to Diego Chara. So watch for him to possibly come on. And Heimer Fore, 22-year-old Colombian left back from Independiente Medellin. And so they've got some young players. They're looking to reshape the roster a little bit. But what are they actually going to show that's different and that we can expect to see from previous matches? And Critchley honestly said, Portland doesn't press often. So when you're talking about how St. Louis evaluates this, it's a lack of a high press. It's an ability to get into the middle third of the field quite often and retaining the ball in safe spaces from the St. Louis side.
You're listening to Flyover Footy on the Big 550 KTRS. We're getting you ready for that 6 p.m. Central game on Sunday night. So hope you are enjoying the show. I hope you're learning a little something about what we might see from Portland and how City might take advantage of that, Matt. We've got plenty of time to do that before we give our starting 11 projections and score projections. So why don't you take us a little deeper?
Yeah, and the fun thing about this is we mentioned the goals against. We mentioned the defense. Both teams have allowed basically the same amount of goals, 21 and 22. So there's not much difference as far as allowing the goals. And we know how frustrated we've been recently with St. Louis's defense. So that should give you a little inclination into where Portland is, having allowed the same amount of goals over the course of the season. On the scoring front, there's only a 0.8 non-penalty expected goals difference between these two clubs. So the underlying metrics, how good of an opportunity they've had on goal, the areas they've been putting themselves into for these shots, there's not that big of a difference in where these teams have been in creating their chances, but there's been an 11 goal difference when it comes to finishing. So St. Louis's job is to continue increasing their finishing compared to what they're producing in the expected goals category. Like they started last week, they overproduced. I know there was a penalty involved, but they overproduced goals compared to expected goals. They need to continue that trend desperately if they want to have a chance against Portland. They will have to overproduce their expected goals. They need to be more clinical in finishing. And this is where Klaus comes in. Klaus has that confidence back. He seems to be playing and practicing a little freer. And so getting Klaus more involved. We talked about he had 22 touches last game against San Jose. That has to go up. You have to get the ball to Klaus's feet. You have to engage him more on goal and just in the run of play. And if there's anything possible from last game, we need to just increase the amount of shots we have on goal. On the shots, St. Louis averages about 0.5 shots per 90 more than Portland. So not that much. Talking about Portland finishing 11 goals better, having a very similar non-penalty expected goals, very similar shots per 90 to both teams. But the Timbers, they're a little behind on the number of shots per 90, but they're a little ahead on the shots on target per 90. So they're more efficient in their shots that they take. Now, to this point in how the ball gets to the areas to take the shots, both teams are only separated by 2 key passes total. They played the same amount of games. St. Louis has 128 key passes to Portland's 130. So they're right there as far as passes that lead to shots. But St. Louis actually has more passes into the penalty area than Portland does, 112-96. So Portland's more likely to carry the ball into the penalty area to get their shots. St. Louis more likely to deliver crosses, deliver passes up, and receive the ball in the penalty box when they get their shot. So a key to the game for me is going to be whether St. Louis will be able to get these shots off in dangerous areas that they get the ball into. The problem St. Louis has had a lot recently is they get the ball into the final third, but they're just either not able to get a shot, or especially they're not able to get a shot on target. They're often shooting into lanes that are blocked. They're often deflected out. And so St. Louis needs to do a better job of getting into these cleared lanes to be able to get shots on target. And David Critchley mentioned a lot of the underlying numbers that they've been tracking when it comes to intensity, being up from last week where they were previously under Olaf Melberg. Phil, he talked about 3 key categories, one being high-speed running, one being total ground covered, and one being PPDA. And let me tell you, when he mentioned PPDA proactively, my eyes just lit up. I said it on social media, and this was Critchley going into the stats, into the tactics that we really love head coaches to be offering us insight into. Critchley mentioned that against San Jose, St. Louis was 4th in MLS in PPDA. And what that means, as a reminder, because we admittedly have not been talking a lot this season on Flyover Footy about PPDA because it's been so embarrassingly high. PPDA is passes per defensive action. What that means is a higher number of PPDA indicates a lower press. You're allowing the opposition to pass the ball a higher number of times before you make a move on the ball or engage in some kind of challenge. A lower PPDA indicates fewer passes by the opposition before you engage on the ball. So you can see how a lower number of passes by the opposition means a better press, whether it's a high press, whether it's a mid press, a counter press. All of those are taken into consideration. So the fun fact about this is the average height of defensive actions against San Jose under Critchley wasn't that different than an Olaf Melberg team. They weren't massively high pressing, but they were doing a great job of counter pressing. If they lost the ball in the middle third, in their defensive third even, they were turning that ball back over very quickly. They were regaining possession very quickly. And that's what Critchley is really wanting to do here in lowering this PPDA number, is if they lose the ball, they need to regain it quickly. If they are on a high press, then they need to engage the ball quickly in those middle third at the very least areas. The fact that we had an increase in high-speed running and total ground covered, that tells me that they're back to this kind of style of St. Louis where you're just out and out intensity the entire match. And honestly, it's a little ironic, I would say, given Olaf Melberg's phrasing at the beginning of the season about wanting nonstop players. And the minute he leaves, we have an increase in high-speed running and total ground covered. Do you make that? Do you see any individual parts of the field where that is most prevalent from the San Jose game? Or, is it Marcel Hartl's running all over the field is now becoming kind of infectious everywhere?
I don't know. In fact, I'm going to flip the script on you a little bit with that question, because when you said those 2 stats were things that Critchley mentioned, I thought, boy, is that scary, because we already have a lot of injuries. Now we're going to put more, more weight on those players. But, perhaps instead of Hartl running all over the field like crazy, who you don't want your DP to do necessarily, at least not his style of a designated player, maybe we're picking our moments to sprint harder, and we're not having to push ourselves quite as hard outside of that. I don't know. That was my first thought, but I don't know how it strikes you, Matt. What do you think?
Both stats are different, right? High-speed running does speak to those sprints. And that's something I think you need to have in this style of play, where you're sprinting to put pressure on the ball. Maybe after you lose it, you're getting guys who aren't immediately on the ball needing to sprint towards it. So I think that is a really good indicator of lowering the PPDA. Those 2 stats go together really well for me. Total ground covered, in a lot of ways, that just speaks to me towards the direct to goalness, where you're trying to take the ball from the middle third of the field and then go direct to goal, whether it's playing the ball long or getting your numbers higher quicker. High-speed running and total ground running can work together when you're talking about trying to get numbers into the attacking third, the attacking half of the field very quickly. And I think that's where I saw them coming into play, is St. Louis was getting a lot of numbers into the attacking half more often than I remember them getting it with under Olaf Melberg. And so both of those stats, I think there's a few ways that all 3 of these stats play together that really paint this big picture.
Yeah, and I would even say, I think what I want to watch for next time, and that I'd noticed a little bit, is They were clearly ready to press and pounce every time a pass was made by San Jose. And I think wondering, like, less ground covered, perhaps if you're keeping the ball up high and you're staying close to those defenders in the press and the press isn't broken a bunch of times, you're doing less recovery runs. You know what I mean? So some of this might be that they're not allowing the press to be broken and they don't have to just like sprint a massive distance to catch up with the ball and defend is one thing. But another is perhaps Critchley is just getting their positioning much better so that there's just less running. And when you're ready, when you need to run, you can sprint harder. So those are two things I'm going to try to watch for now that we know these are some stats we can maybe are important to Critchley and to our team. That's really good stuff, Matt. Thank you.
Well, the other stat that I think is really important to remember that Critchley's focusing on is field tilt. So it's not just the volume of possession, 45, 50, 55, 60. It's looking at how much of the field is being dominated by the team and what areas of the field are. So the field tilt that Critchley mentioned is last week against San Jose, they had about 45% tilt. So they were dominating about 45% of the field their way. And Critchley said they wanted it to be up to 55. So they want to start dominating the ball into the attacking half. So looking at whether St. Louis can start to toe that line past the center line and saying if they start to dominate the ball, whether they're in possession or not, this could speak to their high press. This can speak to off the ball work and being on the defensive end. It doesn't have to be behind the ball, but when they are behind the ball in possession, can St. Louis start to navigate a little bit higher, a little bit regularly, and start to shift that field tilt balance in the upper 50s the way that Critchley wants to do? Because he did talk about the best teams can control the ball and having 10 guys move off the ball for them. Critchley's comments about moving off the ball is going to be fascinating to watch because that's something that I really had a complaint about under Olaf Melberg is players were just not moving off the ball. They weren't being creative. They weren't facilitating for anybody that had the ball. And Critchley has a very focused. So the field tilt, the off the ball movement, and these high speed running, total ground covered, and PPDA are the foundations, it seems, about how Critchley is trying to mold this team to be better.
Love that. And maybe we can talk about field tilt some more because I really want to pick your brain on that more. But I think my lineup might give you a little something you can say there. But speaking of that, you're listening to Flyover Footy on the Big 550 KTRS. And it is time to project our starting 11. And we've got our work cut out for us on this one, Matt. Why don't you give yours and your thoughts on how it might go?
Yeah, I'll just start with my 11. I've got Roman Berkey in net, Giannis Horn left back, Henry Kessler, Timo Baumgartel center backs, Thomas Totland right back, Edu Leuven and Tomas Ostrak as my center mids, Celio Pompeu, Marcel Hartl, Jean De Silva, and Klaus as my attackers in a 4-2-3-1. Now, obviously, Leuven is the question mark. If not Leuven, then I've got Morales in at center mid. But the attacking depth is going to be a problem, Phil. I don't see any other way that it could be. Makai Joyner is with the U19s we mentioned. Cedric Toyshirt is probably going to be out. Conrad Wallem is suspended. Rasmus Alm is still nowhere to be found this season. All are out. We're looking at a bench that, by my count, will take 9 of these 10 players. Ben Lunt, who's an obvious one, Kyle Hebert, Josh Yarrow, Michael Wenzel, Joey Zielinski, Jay Reed, JGR, Alfredo Morales, if Leuven plays, Akil Watts, and Simon Betcher. Now, if you want to rewind that for a second, Simon Betcher is the only attacker in that bunch. We don't have depth because of some of these injuries, suspensions, the outs. It's not looking great from an attacking depth perspective. And if you followed City in the past few weeks or this whole season, you know that most of our subs come in the attack. I just don't know a way around this unless we have a short-term call-up to either Emil Jaskelenin, Brendan McSorley, or possibly Caden Glover.
I like that. That's a really good shout. And I wouldn't mind seeing them in this situation just because you never know what a kid can do just by working really hard, having some speed and pace. Yeah, it could be a good call there.
Also, Emil Jaskelenin and Brendan McSorley and Caden Glover, to an extent, all are very well known by David Critchley in the system he's implementing. So that's my long shot, my hot take of the day is we may likely see one or more call-ups between Jaskelenin, McSorley, or Glover.
And,
sorry, Glover doesn't need a call up because he's on the roster, but I think it's more likely Jaskelenin or McSorley sees a call up.
And Jaskelenin got a goal. It was a very nice one. And Reed had a beautiful assist last night to, who was that? Mateo Cade on the far post. Just a beautiful one from both of them. Well done. So good stuff at City 2. Really good tie in there with City 2, Matt, with Critchley. Good thoughts there. I will give my 11. And I'm so excited about this one. I told you guys I'm done giving what I think the coach will do, though I've enjoyed Critchley's lineup so far. But I'm going to give what I want to see. And I'm so bullish on this one. I'm really proud of it. Berkey, Horn at left back, Kessler and Baumgartel at center back, Totland at right back. Hopefully, we're allowed to pull all of that off due to health. I really hope that works out. I am bullish on Leuven and Ostrak in the middle. I could see Morales and Leuven. If you want to defend and then attack later, we could use Ostrak at the end if that's the way you want to go. But I want to see Leuven and Ostrak. Then I would say Celio on the left, Hartl at the 10 position. And here's where people are going to not like me, is I'm putting Betcher at right mid. But stick with me. And then Klaus up top. What I will argue is that, we talked about field tilt, and I don't think this messes up field tilt if you just draw up the formation this way. But in attack, I'd like to see Horn, Kessler, and Baumgartel stay back to guard against a counterattack. 3 defenders is pretty typical nowadays about that. And that would mean you have Totland attacking wide right, Celio wide left. That's where he likes to go anyway, so they're very comfortable. Leuven and Ostrak, if we keep Horn back a little bit, neither one of them are absolutely responsible for stopping a counterattack. So that's kind of nice. And then we have Hartl in the middle doing whatever Hartl wants to do. Klaus doing what he does that we see everywhere. And then Betcher, just like Toyshirt as a right mid, it's not a natural thing for him to like run in behind and carry the ball forward, but he was able to fold in and find his good spots in this game, even though he was playing a right mid position. So I want to see Betcher do that. He can lead the line. He can stretch the defense a little bit. Klaus can do his direct role and feed it to Betcher running on Celio. And so anyway, I know that's a bit of a field tilt, but I think that would work really well. If it doesn't, I could see Watts playing right mid if you guys want to be really careful about who should be playing their natural position, that kind of thing. And again, Morales could start with Leuven if you want to be more conservative. But does that mess with your field tilt thing there, Matt, or does that work for you?
No, conceptually, it works really well, and it aligns with what we've seen in the past with St. Louis taking 3 of their 4 backline members and keeping them a little more defensive. And I think Giannis Horn, as a left center back of sorts, provides a lot that makes a lot of sense. Thomas Totland told me this week he loves getting into the attack, and he liked to do it as a right wing back earlier in the season. So that checks out. And I think obviously if Leuven can go, Leuven in the defensive third, keeping that 6th spot is about as locked down as you can offer it. And he provides a lot of directness with the ball. Like he can change the direction of the ball very well. Getting him more touches in that area in the midfield is going to be huge. And then no matter who his complement is, or if he can't go, I think there's still a lot of quality that we have between Morales, Ostrak, and maybe even Akil Watts, who I like Akil Watts in the midfield a little bit more, especially in what he could offer in the attack more than I do at right back.
Yeah, and he's a good presser. People don't hate his defending, but he is really good at pressing. So remember that. I'm glad you said that because that was my thought too. Lastly, Jean De Silva. In private, I've been really mean to this man. He's no longer a starter for me. He got tired and he stopped defending. I would even maybe put that blame on that goal from San Jose on him. He looked awful for the rest of the game once that happened, and I don't want to see it anymore. He's a super sub at best, and that would help with our subs anyway for the attacking subs at the end of the game. So I'm good with leaving him off of my starting 11 for the foreseeable future, everyone. I'll stop there. Matt, let's give our quick predictions for the score and get out of here.
Yeah, we're massive underdogs here in this match, no doubt. Portland from Vegas, they're a -130. A draw is +300, and St. Louis is +330. So it's heavily favoring St. Louis, or heavily favoring Portland, with St. Louis being the second biggest underdog this entire week in the 5 matches. Sporting KC is the biggest underdog by the odds against LAFC. No surprise on either of those. My take is, optimistically, I'm hoping to get out of this with a draw. I think a win would set this fan base on fire. Absolutely. And it's to the moon. We would be a team in 12th or 13th place, and our momentum would be through the roof if we went into Portland and took a win. I'm going to be happy with a draw, say 2-2. And I think this is going, I think the momentum can continue with a draw very, very well.
Yep, I agree. 2-2 draw would be wonderful, and that's what I will also predict. Thank you guys for listening. Again, we're Flyover Footy on the big 550 KTRS. Please enjoy this game. If we come out of there seeing our boys put in a really good shift, I'm going to be proud no matter what, showing the world what Flyover Footy can look like. Thanks again for listening, everybody. We'll catch you next time.